So you started explaining how the law has changed and become more and more relative and less interested in truth.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, one of the things that I wish law school taught was Western legal history in a little bit more of a fulsome way. And we've seen in Western legal history the same trajectory in our understanding of law as we've seen in our understanding of truth at large, and also our understanding of culture. It was once the case that law was believed to be divine, or natural law was the word that was often used. Mm-hmm. It was objective, it was God-made, and it was God's will for the world, which is still a Christian understanding of law. Mm-hmm. And that was what people believed. And that was expressed in the way that we had a common law system, for example. And the assumption in common law is that law is discovered. It isn't made. And this conviction that we are actually discovering law, and each case that comes before us is a case where we need to discern from what we know to be true and from divine natural law, how the law should apply to this particular case. And the West went through a period of hundreds of years, maybe even 1,000 years, where the idea that you could make law rather than discover it was kind of a heretical idea. There's a brilliant quote, which I'll read to you from Edward Coke, who's a very famous English common lawyer, lived in the 1500s. And he says this, he says, "For as in nature we see the infinite distinction of things proceed from some unity, as many flowers from one root, many rivers from one fountain, many arteries in the body of man from one heart, many veins from one liver, and many sinews from the brain. So, without question, the law rises from the divine mind. And this admirable unity and consent in such diversity of things proceeds only from God, the fountain and founder of all good laws and constitutions."
Wow!
And there's similar comments by Sir William Blackstone, who is is probably the great English common lawyer of history, where they believed that they were obsessed with the transcendent, the divine standard, and they believed that there was an objective truth and objective law. But of course, postmodernism comes along, and actually secular humanism comes along, and secular humanism sort of cuts the source, which is God. God is the source of law. Sir Isaac Newton believed that God was the source of the universe, so he believed that it would be rationally intelligible because God's behind it. And so the lawyers believe God's behind the law. But of course, when you cut that basis in secular humanism, then you say, oh no, it's just all about some rational intellect type basis. They didn't realise the fruits of what they were doing then to cut the objective source. But you saw around that time as well legal positivism become more and more accepted as the way to understand law.
Define that for us.
So legal positivism is the idea that law doesn't rely on any moral basis for its validity. It is immaterial whether the law aligns with what is moral as to whether it is actually legitimate.
And somebody...
This was to Jeremy Bentham.
Actually advocates this?
Well, this is actually the prevailing legal theory of our time. So the only thing that validates a law is whether or not it was made by someone with the requisite authority. Now that's legal positivism, and legal positive law is the law that we deal with today. And law is made not necessarily in relation to any objective truth standard, but it is made because parliaments have authority. It's made because the relevant institutions have the authority. And all of a sudden, we're sitting there as Christians going, well, this is dangerous. This is really dangerous.
Yes.
Because when competing truth claims come into the picture and people are saying, well, the law should be this or the law should be that, there's nothing to measure it by. It's their preferences versus their preferences. And the philosophies become postmodern. And now all of a sudden you're in a situation where actually the law and human rights and legal philosophy is all about autonomy. That's the ultimate good that it seeks to protect. I mean, you think of something like euthanasia. You've got two ways of measuring whether euthanasia is a good law. You can say autonomy, it's a good law. It's all about me, postmodernism, legal positivism. Or you can say, law is actually all about enshrining that which is good and true. And so euthanasia is bad because it is the willful killing of a human being. It's wrong. Now, those are the two angles. The same can be said for same-sex marriage. The same can be said for any number of abortion. You know
what? I actually see that perfectly explains the current problem and conflict we have with conceptualizing the plebiscite. And my challenge is that there are so many Christians and conservatives calling for a plebiscite. The only reason I'm okay with a plebiscite is because I believe we will win. I believe there's no room for doubt that that's exactly why the leftists don't want a plebiscite, is because they know that traditional marriage will win as well. However, I would not call for a plebiscite letting anyone be under the assumption that it will make any difference to my position on the law, because the authority of the people and the authority of the government does not change the morality of legislating something which is not helpful for the society. And homosexual marriage and removing this ancient boundary is not helpful for society. So whether the plebiscite succeeds or fails is irrelevant to how I would vote on that if I was a politician. So I don't know why anybody would be calling for a plebiscite with any kind of appeal to legal positivism. I think what we should be saying is vote for just people. This is where we need to literally change the culture. Don't vote for people who think the parliament or the people have the authority to redefine morality. They don't. Vote for moral people. Vote for people who will honour the Judeo-Christian values that the natural law that Australia was founded upon and which will continue to serve us well into the future. I think it's a dangerous line to walk down saying vote for some kind of legal positivism. I think we need to be saying vote for people that will vote for the right thing no matter what.
Yeah, so you're talking about the issue of conviction. You vote for people based on their convictions, because there's a lot of issues that you won't necessarily know their articulated position on. But if you know what kind of morality they hold, or if you know what kind of convictions they have in their hearts, you can pretty well guess how they're going to go.
Or you can ask them.
Or you can ask them, exactly. So I fully agree. I fully agree with that. But I do think that the distinction that we've been talking about, this distinction between whether or not the truth is just something that is according to my preferences, or whether the truth is something that's objective and outside of myself, that's just the age-old issue of culture. It's the issue, I believe, that's in the Bible. So Romans 1, Paul does his little diagnosis of culture, and what does he say? He says the problem is people are always trying to do the truth exchange. They're always trying to worship and serve someone who is actually a creature instead of the creator. They want the creature to become the creator. They want the person who's in the position of creature to actually be raised up to a position where they set the boundaries, where they set the morality, where they set the truth, where they can say, I'm 6'7" with hairy hands, but I'm a woman today because I'm creating the world. And it's this idea of self-exaltation and the diminution of God, actually, and the truth. So that's a caricature, but there you go. And I don't actually have hairy hands, but but that is the age-old conflict that we deal with, and I think the church needs to be cognizant of that in all spheres. And Christians in law, Christians in culture, Christians in politics, they need to ask themselves, where's this coming from? Is it exaltation of the human, or is it exaltation of God?
And boiling this down to the individual response, to the viewer that's watching this, what can they do about these huge, perhaps esoteric terms that we're moving around, is you can change the culture. You can speak up. You can vote for someone who will vote for natural justice, someone who will vote for the sanctity of marriage, for the sanctity of life, and the sacred family unit as the fabric of society above any other issue that you might also be interested in. That's how we change culture. We give weight to the right values with our voice and our vote. Tell me, in the time we've got left in this segment, more about this journey that we're having legally. How is that now presenting risks to us in Australia?
Well, I think the issue is, and this is particularly an issue for Christians, it brings into sharp focus the conflict that we have, the inevitable conflict that we have with culture as it's developing. Because we sit back and we say, well, hang on, this is true, this is right, this is good. And it's not hateful of anyone. It doesn't even matter who I am or what I'm doing or who you are and what you're doing. This is true. I'd like to model that, and I'd like actually to take that into the public square and tell others to model it, and try and get society to model it. That's what the Christian gospel's all about. It's about spreading the truth. That's what Christians do in their workplaces. They're told to be salt and light and represent the truth. You can see though that is a conflict waiting to happen, because when what you say is the truth comes into conflict with what somebody else says is them in some way, that's going to cause tremendous conflict. And so I think that the issue we're having now is that people who make truth claims or live according to truth claims, particularly Christian truth claims, which are quite exclusive, in their public square, whether we've got situations with students at universities that have got into trouble doing this, or in the public service. And I'm talking about things like praying for somebody. I'm talking about things like questioning the policy of a department about marching in the Mardi Gras. I'm talking about things that are pretty benign, but because of course they put their head up and say, well, hang on, I disagree, or I'd like you to be aware of the fact that there's another view here, they're just pounced on. And they're pounced on quite powerfully, and that's going to just keep happening. And we need to know that there's really no way around this. One of the big lies that has gripped the church, and one of the big lies that has gripped the Christian community, is if only we were nice, people would love us.
So true.
If only the word winsome gets around a lot. If only we could just say that hard truth, but say it winsomely, whatever that looks like, they'll love us. Now, the Cooper's Brewery incident of last week proves beyond any doubt that that's not true.
Absolutely.
But it's never been true, and we're lying to ourselves. Jesus said, a servant's not greater than his master, and they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. They won't like it. They're going to say nasty things, etc., etc. And that's your lot as a Christian. You go into the world and you say, this is demonstrably true, and do you know what? I'm saying it because I love you.
Amen.
And I want you to know the truth, and the truth will set you free, blah, blah, blah. That person says, get out of my life, Christian. What are they going to say? They're going to say, okay, I'll still be your friend. But if that person says, I'm going to sue you, Christian, we're in a new square. So, and I would like to say too, that a lot of the narrative we get is that the discrimination and the victimization is all one way. So the narrative that's out there is that it's the people in racial minorities, sexual minorities, it's women, it's these sorts of things that experience these sorts of vilification and discrimination that the law talks about, that the Human Rights Law Alliance gets involved in. The truth is that's not true. The truth is it's two-way. There are both sides. The thing is that Christians historically don't go to law. They historically don't sue people, and there's biblical reasons for that. There's references in to be careful about suing. Also, there's the turning the other cheek and this kind of thing. So when someone refuses to print a book that I've published, as happened to Dr. David Van Gen recently, we don't ring the Anti-Discrimination Tribunal and say, listen, I want to make a complaint about this publisher who refused to print my book. Or when the Australian Christian Lobby goes to retain a consultant, and the consultant says no. Not on your life. That's against my conscientious convictions. Or when a Christian group puts an app in the App Store, and Apple come back and say, we're not listing that app because it's against our convictions. We don't ring people and start suing and start using the tribunals and the processes. And so the traffic is one way in one sense, but it doesn't mean that in the culture it's not two-way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the narrative says that it's all the minorities that cop all the abuse from all the Christians. which is a grossly inaccurate overgeneralisation.
And I was at an inquiry a hearing in Tasmania on the Anti-Discrimination Act just the other day, and somebody who was presenting at that said exactly what you just said, almost verbatim, to the Parliament, and it wasn't questioned.
Goodness me. And it's manifestly untrue.
Manifestly untrue.
It's the Christians who are being hauled before all these tribunals for speaking truth, motivated by concern and compassion and love. And any question of those motivations is taken as fact without any evidence to the contrary.
That's right, exactly.
It's a highly risky situation.
Yeah, and look, even those situations where it is believed to be true, the great conversation missing from all of this is motive. And I'll use an example to make my point. The other day, Peter Dutton was in the media, and he was saying that the CEOs and the big companies with their millions of dollars and their primary responsibility being their shareholders shouldn't be in the same-sex marriage debate. He says they shouldn't be using that money and using shareholders' money to go out there and clobber to clobber politicians and all the rest of it about the same-sex marriage issue. He says, I'm a politician, we'll do that. The people will speak. The CEO should stick to their knitting, which is a well-known expression of you should do what you're primarily supposed to do and spend the money on that, which is a fair enough opinion, and people will disagree or agree. However, I saw in the news, they're reporting it as, Peter Dutton tells prominent gay CEO to get back to his knitting. And you can see that in that is this slur.
Is Alan Joyce gay?
Yes. You didn't know Alan Joyce?
I had no idea.
Oh, well, there you go. Alan Joyce, Qantas CEO, is gay. But he wasn't even in that comment actually specifically mentioning Joyce. He had mentioned him earlier in the conversation. But you can see how there's just a slur and a presumption of this cartoon of a bigot that's hiding behind this comment, where even something innocent is insinuated as being evil. There's no concept of motive going on here. I can tell you, Peter Dutton, I'm sure, had no such motive when he said that. And we find that so often when these complaints come in and we're having this process, the person that we're helping is a well-intentioned, kind Christian person who wouldn't hurt a fly. But there's been no conversation about motive. The other side have painted a cartoon. The other side are attacking a cartoon. It's all false. And I wish that was something that could come back into the public discourse.
When we come back, let's talk about the difference between courage and cavalier and how we can walk wisely between those two.
Fair enough. Love to.